Hey there, movie lovers. Welcome back to Rocky Watches Movies. Today we're diving into the 1984 comedy classic Revenge of the Nerds. This film is widely remembered for its wild antics, iconic characters, and a humorous portrayal of the underdog nerds taking on the jocks. But there's more to this movie than meets the eye. Revenge of the Nerds is full of fascinating tidbits. So put on your bow tie and let's go through 20 things you never knew about Revenge of the Nerds. Miguel Tejada Flores and Tim Metcalf wrote the original script, drawing inspiration from Miguel's father, who was a brilliant nerd, who emigrated from Bolivia and was part of a group of mischievous hackers and scientists at Caltech. The movie's plot and title come from a magazine article published around that time about nerdy Silicon Valley innovators. Filming at the University of Arizona wasn't as easy as it might seem. It got approval after 20th Century Fox agreed to make a large donation to the university. But 2 weeks later, the university's administrators revoked permission to film on campus. They feared the film would become another Animal House, which had already given the Greek system a bad name. Director Jeff Kanu explained that he had to convince the sororities and fraternities that this wasn't a movie that promoted sexism. He reassured them that it was about the triumph of the underdog. Eventually, the filmmakers won them over and they were allowed to shoot on campus. The set was anything but conventional. Ted McGinley, who played the jock Stan Gable, shared that the atmosphere on set felt more like a college party than a movie production. The crew invited students from the university to hang out while they filmed, complete with beer, pizza, and sandwiches. McGinley found it hard to believe that movie sets could be so laid back and fun, but this unconventional approach made for an unforgettable time. Also on set, an off-duty police officer working as a security guard found a vial with a small amount of cocaine in a dressing room. The police decided not to pursue an investigation because it would be impossible to determine whose it was. Before Robert Carradine was cast as the main nerd, Louis Skolnick, producers approached Rick Moranis for the role. However, Moranis had already portrayed the iconic nerd Louis in Ghostbusters and didn't feel the need to repeat himself. He turned down the role, stating that he never got offered Arnold Schwarzenegger roles. Carradine ultimately took the role, and the rest, as they say, is history. A large portion of the film was improvised, including the interactions between Booger and Takashi. One scene where Booger tricks Takashi during a card game was entirely improvised. Curtis Armstrong and Brian Tocci were given a deck of cards by the prop department and told to come up with something. Timothy Busfield's character Poindexter was originally named Lipschultz, after a prop guy on set. According to Busfield, the character didn't have many lines and was originally supposed to be a violin-playing Henry Kissinger. The name was later changed to Poindexter, and at Busfield's audition he wore a cheap costume and did a performance to Michael Jackson's Beat It, which helped him land the role. Not every member of the cast was thrilled about the film. Robert Carradine and Timothy Busfield, who played Louis and Poindexter, admitted that they weren't exactly enthusiastic about the project. At the time, they felt being a nerd wasn't something to be proud of and took the roles mainly for the paycheck. Curtis Armstrong, who played Booger, was also initially uncertain about the script. The character of Booger was almost non-existent when he first read it, the lines were crude and the character wasn't fleshed out. But Armstrong, who had previously appeared in Risky Business, trusted that with a solid cast, director and writers, the movie would turn out to be something special. Despite its crude humour, he felt the film had an underlying message of inclusion and acceptance that transcended the vulgar jokes. One of the film's most memorable scenes is the belching contest between Booger and Ogre. But Curtis Armstrong couldn't actually belch on command. Instead, the filmmakers had to use a sound effect of a camel having an orgasm, blending it with a human belch to create the iconic 7-second noise. In an early draft of the script, Stan Gable, the jock played by Ted McGinley, was supposed to have a secret. He was actually a nerd. At the end of the film, after the nerd's triumph, Gable was supposed to reveal his true identity as a closet nerd. This scene was ultimately cut though, but it would have added another interesting layer to Gable's character. The fictional fraternity Lambda Lambda Lambda, which became the home of the nerds in the film, went on to become a real organization. In 2006, the University of Connecticut established a real-life chapter of the fraternity, though it's not part of the traditional Greek system. Lambda 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 is a co-ed group focused on pop culture and the fellowship of its members. So while there may not be any panty raids, the legacy of the nerds lives on. Before the film was shot, Robert Carradine and Anthony Edwards decided to test out their nerd costumes. They attended a few fraternity rush events at the university to see how their pocket protectors and other nerd accessories were received. One fraternity president gave them a single look and immediately turned them away. It seems not everyone was ready for the nerd revolution just yet. Curtis Armstrong and Michelle Meyrink actually played their own instruments in the film. However, Timothy Busfield, who portrayed Poindexter, had to fake his violin playing. Despite taking lessons before the shoot, his attempts didn't quite meet the mark, so a professional's performance was dubbed over his scenes. James Cromwell, who played Lewis's father, is credited with creating the nerd laugh that Lewis delivers when dropping his son off at college. Cromwell has admitted that he unknowingly picked up the laugh from his then wife. He hadn't realised the significance of the laugh until he heard it at the film's premiere. While Revenge of the Nerds inspired 3 movie sequels, a TV adaptation didn't get the same success. In 1991, director Peter Baldwin helmed a pilot for a TV spin-off, with Rob Stone cast as Louis Skolnick. However, the show was never picked up. Later in the 2000s, Robert Carradine and Curtis Armstrong pitched a reality competition series inspired by Revenge of the Nerds, where nerds would compete against jocks for prizes. Though initially rejected, the concept evolved, and in 2012, they launched King of the Nerds, a reality show that features nerds competing in various challenges for a prize of $100,000. Producers Ted Field and Peter Samuelson revealed that they had to push hard to keep the film's final pep rally scene. Others working on the production wanted a more dramatic, even destructive ending. But Field and Samuelson believed a non-violent approach would be more powerful. They explained that the nerds' peaceful stand was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of passive resistance. Director Jeff Kanu and writer Steve Zacharias have expressed regret over the film's infamous assault by deception scene, where Lewis poses as Stan to sleep with Betty. Kanu admitted, "In a way, it's not excusable. If it were my daughter, I probably wouldn't like it." Critics have since condemned the scene as a troubling example of how sexual assault was once played for laughs, reflecting the misogynistic norms of the era. Timothy Busfield, who played Poindexter, had such thick glasses that he couldn't see properly while filming. During scenes where he had to walk, he needed a guide to help him navigate. Revenge of the Nerds is often credited with popularizing nerd culture. Curtis Armstrong pointed out that the film's climax, where the nerds stand up at a pep rally and embrace their identity, was a turning point for nerd culture. The film championed the underdog, making it cool to be a nerd long before it became mainstream. Armstrong even confessed that he gets emotional thinking about how this scene resonated with audiences, as it laid the foundation for what we now call geek culture. When the film was screened in Dallas, it didn't exactly go as planned. While the film had performed well in Las Vegas, the response in Dallas was lukewarm, causing a significant drop in its marketing. The film was released on just 364 screens initially, a far cry from the larger release it had originally been slated for. Jeff Kanu was baffled by the reaction, but as we know, the film eventually found its audience and grew into a beloved classic. In 2006, production began on a Revenge of the Nerds remake, but it was short-lived. The planned cast included Adam Brody and Jenna Dewan, but the project was ultimately shelved, sparing us from what would have probably been a disappointing reboot. And there you have it, folks. You now know a little bit more about Revenge of the Nerds. If you enjoyed the video, which I presume you did as you got this far, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos coming to Rocky Watches Movies. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.